So we're going to start off today with Christine from Salamander UK. So Christine is our CEO and producer at Salamander. We are an animation and design studio with studios in Eton and Dundee. We work with B2B clients to simplify their complex messages using a range of visual and animation techniques, which I'm sure Christine will tell you all about, so I won't step on your toes too much. But Christine's going to talk us through the importance of using animation to tell your story in pharmaceutical marketing.
Great, thanks, Sam. I'm just going to share my screen. Working?
Yeah.
Well. So as Sam mentioned, thanks for the intro. So Salamander UK, we passionately believe in the superpower of static and animated images because we really believe that they stay in your long-term memory and can transcend language, age, and culture. And that's why we love in conveying complex messages for our pharma clients using the animation design. And we do it on any platform. And we use a mixture of 2D, 3D, stop motion, AR, and VR. And really, the curlier the creative challenge, the more our creative artists love it. So it's good fun. So our talk today is on motion and emotion. And I'm going to talk you through the effectiveness of using animation to tell your story in the pharma industry. So we consistently bombarded with online information, whether it be white papers or TikTok. And this statement couldn't be more relevant right now with COVID and working from home. With people inside day and night, screen time has gone through the roof. So on the 24th of March, Facebook announced that in many countries that are affected by the virus, that their total messaging had increased by 50%. And in Italy, it had increased by 70%, which is a massive number. On the flip side, on the 31st of March, 86% of UK-based marketers were delaying or reviewing their campaigns, and up to 50% on the 16th of March, so that's leaving only 14% of activations to continue as planned, which is a real shame. There is a captive audience online, and now more than ever is an opportunity to share the company or product story in a human and approachable way. However, with the lack of face-to-face interaction, reps need to find new creative ways to reach their audience. What's more, it needs to stand out from the rest of the online noise, which is most difficult in technical marketing. Why, you ask? Technical brands tend to tell and not show, and often there's not a clear physical product to represent, so marketers shy away from using visual content, which is vital to being memorable. There are a few main pain points within pharma, from slow market growth to policy reforms. However, attitudes towards technical products and their target audiences, specifically within B2B, are the biggest issues that can be tackled straight away. So target audiences, it's vital to quash the common misconception that B2B marketing is about marketing to businesses, because whether you're B2B or B2C, you're still marketing to people. And according to research by Merit, up to 73% of B2B buyers are now millennials. And this is particularly important, as we all know that to market effectively, we must know our buyer profile. Today, millennials spend an average of 7.2 hours online each day, 2.4 of which are spent watching videos. The millennial generation of buyers will expect the same kind of intimacy, immediacy, and coherency as their favorite B2C brands. Therefore, emotive marketing is an essential. But what about technical or seemingly boring products? Well, we passionately believe that visual content, particularly visual content in motion, is an engaging and productive form of marketing for all sectors, even those who consider themselves boring. And to quote Joe Hale, there's no such thing as a boring sector, just boring brands. So 90% of information that is transmitted to the brain is visual, and we process visuals 60,000 times faster than text, and these stay in our long-term memory, which is a very good cause for doing motion. Knowing that 92% of B2B customers watch videos online shows the impact that video marketing will have on your target audience. But we have this down to a science. So why does emotional content work so well? It's all down to how we're hardwired. And I'm simplifying here, but the brain can be thought of as two parts. Section 1, which focuses on emotions and is concerned with our immediate satisfaction. And section 2, which is more logical and deliberative and being what we would consider thinking. An emotive video triggers immediate reaction from section 1, which affects behavior in viewers without them even knowing. And in the context of the multi-channel environment, with so much content vying for our clicks, it makes sense to aim for section 1 part of the brain with emotional content to help encourage audiences to take action. Logical content can be used to reinforce decisions in the section 2 part of the brain, and this can be especially useful for the short-term sales uplift. But we need to lead with emotional content for long-term brand growth. So let's see this in action. Case study 1 is an animation on psoriatic arthritis, or PSA, bringing an important condition to life using a poignant voiceover and giving us an insight into the patient's story, making us care about the illness using animation as a vehicle. The mood's sad and you feel for the patient.
I've been living with psoriatic arthritis for around 30 years now. For years, doctors treated my symptoms, but only after I was referred to a rheumatologist was I finally diagnosed with PSA. All that time wasted. PSA has affected every aspect of my life. My children didn't understand why I didn't get down on the floor and play with them. They were little boys who just wanted to have fun with their daddy. Made me feel like a bad father. It also made things difficult with my wife. She didn't really understand what I was going through. She would say things that were meant to help, but made me feel more upset. Sometimes when things get bad, I need to walk the cane. I try not to because people's attitude towards me changes. Like when my boss said he could tell when I was coming down the hall because my walk sounded different. People inadvertently say hurtful things.
So to lighten the mood a bit, case study 2 is about sleep apnea, and it's a common condition explained using simple, cheerful, positive, and hopeful animation content to illustrate the solution. And both these animations make a totally different approach, but are both extremely effective in eliciting their intended emotions to the audience. And this comparison highlights how animation can shift your mood and change your perception of a product.
This is Mike. Mike has moderate to severe obstructive sleep apnea. After years of struggling with CPAP and constantly being tired, Mike felt hopeless. Then Mike found out about Inspire. Inspire is the only FDA-approved obstructive sleep apnea treatment that treats the root cause of sleep apnea with just the click of a button. Inspire is a small device that keeps your airway open using a gentle pulse. It's implanted in the body with 3 small incisions in a same-day outpatient procedure. After the procedure, Mike works with his doctor to fine-tune his Inspire. Once it's fine-tuned, Mike simply clicks the remote to turn on Inspire and goes down to sleep. While Mike is asleep, Inspire monitors his breathing. Every time he takes a breath, a gentle pulse moves the tongue out of the way and keeps Mike breathing freely. And more importantly, sleeping soundly, the way he used to. This has been a total game changer for Mike. Mike is getting more out of life and back to being his old self again. No mask, no hose, just sleep.
So why animation, you might ask? Well, we've got a few suggestions why to choose animation. It breaks down language barriers and it can be created remotely, which is very, very appropriate given the current circumstances. It's editable and easily updated, which is good for ever-changing policies in pharma. We can create out-of-this-world scenes without a Hollywood budget. It's memorable. Studies have shown that viewers retain 95% of video message compared to just 10% of reading text. And it's extremely shareable, social media being extremely important at present. So consumers are increasingly distrusting of advertising and marketing, particularly younger customers, and especially the millennials who choose brands from companies that share the same values. This was confirmed in a recent study called Authentic Brand Study, which showed that 91% of consumers are willing to reward a brand for authenticity. Pharma brands will come out on top if they're transparent in their social media marketing strategies and the content they produce. Social content such as influencer marketing, partnerships with advocacy, and cause marketing will be the content that actually matters to consumers and will make pharma brands relevant to them. So the bottom line is authenticity always wins the day. You have 4 seconds to convert someone when they land on your website before they move on. And if you have an animated video, this increases to 10 seconds, a massive improvement on a fickle audience. Animation boosts conversion rates. Including a video on your landing page can boost conversion rates by up to 80%. And video increases organic search traffic on a website by 157%, which is massive. 64% of people are more likely to complete an action, whether that's to fill out a contact form or complete a purchase, once they've watched a video. So if you use animation to explain the benefits of your product or service to the user, they're more likely to watch the entire video than read that content on your website, allowing your message to get across in an engaging way whilst the user learns more about your business. Not all drugs are created equal, and if you can use medical animation to showcase a superior mechanism of action, for example, and elicit an emotional response, you will take a big step towards differentiation and memorability. So, future marketing trends. While there is no business as usual anymore, pharma marketing is mostly staying the course for now in the shadow of COVID-19. A survey of ad agencies and communication firms that handle pharma clients found both slowdowns and bright spots, but mostly lots of question marks as the situation continues to unfold. History shows us that in any economic downturn, one of the first expenses cut is advertising and marketing, as we all know. In the aftermath of 2008 recession, for example, advertising media spending dropped 13%. This downturn, however, is not a financial one, but one with a health problem, and where pharma can help and is a topical news. So, however, for now, marketing and healthcare marketing continues, albeit from home offices and on virtual platforms. The shift from in-person to digital is not only happening in the office work groups, but also for advertising, medical conferences, and sales rep detailing. For cancelled or postponed conferences, we can recreate animated presentations and virtual event staging in a virtual space for your talks and conferences, and these can be held online to ensure that you stay current with your target audiences. Here are some examples of past animated content created for various international conferences using multi-screens, in some cases up to 18 screens, all showing different animations and all clickable as if you had a proper PowerPoint, and some even being geomapped. We have now digitally recreated the space of the auditorium in 3D to recreate the environment and enable our clients to continue to run conferences from their desktops and to keep enlightening, training, or growing sales via their presentations in a webinar format. As you can see, it allows for an entertaining and eye-catching environment in which to hold your webinars or sales conferences, and at a much more affordable cost than flying delegates all around the world to international destinations, and all the costs involved around setting up bricks and mortar versions. So I'll let this play through. It's got a few more examples, but it really gives you the variety of different styles and approaches we could take in any kind of presentation, and make it feel like you're at a global conference without leaving your desk, wherever that may be. So our post-pandemic predictions. A recent survey based on responses from over 100 farmers and bioscience companies indicated that by 2022, 1/3 of pharma companies will be spending over 50% of their marketing budget on digital channels. The need for increased digital marketing is here to stay, as media and research companies adjust from live events to virtual ones, so are consumers adjusting to digitizing their behavior. Some demographics, like older consumers, may have been previously uncomfortable with buying groceries or other goods online, but the coronavirus has forced them to forget comfortable. Once they fall into this new routine, however, and get used to the ease of delivery to their doorstep, such shoppers may be hard-pressed to return to clicks and mortar, experts say. And in fact, this statistic blew me away. Nearly 40% of current online grocery shoppers made their first online grocery purchase in March. That's just bonkers. So this is also applicable to pharma, where online pharmacy market in Europe is expected to grow at a compound annual rate of 14% during the period of 2019 to 2025. So in conclusion, animation can be used for corporate or product explainers, educational training, conferences or webinars, online or in print, using 2D, 3D, stop motion, motion graphics, AR and VR. Hopefully I've convinced you of the effectiveness of using animation to tell your story in the pharma industry, to brand, educate and convert. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much, Christine. That was amazing. So we'll move on. I'll hand over to Neil now with the amazing background he's got there. So Neil is the head of business acquisition at Rewind. Rewind are an immersive content studio who work in AR, VR, MR, and much more, I believe. So they work with their clients to build memorable immersive experiences for the brands they work with. So Neil's going to talk us through why using immersive experiences is important in pharmaceuticals.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Right, okay, thanks for the lovely introduction. I've now realised my camera's in the wrong place, so I'm not going to be looking at you, sorry. Yeah, thanks for being invited along. A little bit about Rewind, very briefly. Yeah, we are an immersive content studio. We've been running for 9 years. We're in a little independent studio just in St Albans, just outside of London. We predominantly work with a lot of different types of brands, whether that be direct to brand or via agency. We've worked with a variety of different studios as well. And that's just a kind of a brief snippet of some of the work that we've done. We're very fortunate in the sense that we have kind of led the way from an immersive point of view over the last 9 years. It doesn't sound very long, but we like to think of ourselves as kind of veterans in the immersive space. A lot of different companies, such as the one that I used to work for, The Mill, obviously do an incredible job doing immersive work. But I moved to Rewind to double down and focus on that, while a lot of other companies only kind of really dabble as a kind of a small part of their business. So Rewind is a fantastic studio. What do? We do a lot of different stuff, but we like to kind of normally bundle it into these 3 different columns: VR, AR, and MR. And now normally when I present, I'd ask for a show of hands about how familiar people are with these kind of headings, but I'm going to go ahead and assume that everyone's relatively comfortable these days. I think from a kind of a lockdown perspective, we as a business have seen an increase in outreach from various different people looking to use XR as a way of thinking differently about how they can communicate with their clients and other brands, whether that be as a replacement for physical events such as Zoom, which is a nice way of doing things, right up to kind of building virtual environments to host hundreds, if not thousands, of different people. There are some very big ideas being floated around at the moment. I won't drill into those topics too much. We're all, I think, very familiar with what they are these days. What it does mean, though, is as a studio that is predominantly made up of visual effects and AAA game developers, we put experience right at the top of what we try and build into everything that we do. We put the experience and the narrative first, and we use the right technology and the software in order to deliver on those goals. So it's interesting to kind of look at how that weaves in with Pharma. I'll be the first to admit that we haven't worked as a company with a lot of Pharma clients, and as I started doing my research, it became really, really fascinating to see how kind of the XR industry has been picked up by various different areas of the industry and hospitals, and that's something I'm going to have a look at with you guys now, and look at some different examples. And try and kind of pull at some different threads about how I think they've used storytelling and narrative in order to get the best out of that immersive experience. From a studio point of view, and I'm conscious of time, but I think we're all comfortable at home, so I'll just kind of crack on. Like I said, we always put the user experience first, whether that be in VR, AR, or MR, and that kind of gets encapsulated into XR. And I just thought I'd show you a snippet of a previous experience that we did, where you can kind of get an idea of the kind of technology and the design of an event or an experiential event that we do. So this is something that we did last October. It was called Ride with the Bride. We worked with Universal Studio to deliver the first public-facing experience where we designed and built not just the VR content, but we worked with another company called HoloRide, where they designed a platform that takes all the motion data and the telemetry data from a car, and plugs that into your VR. So when your car moves, your experience moves, which to the layperson actually sounds terrifying. But actually, when you put it on, everything connects so tightly that it actually removes any nausea whatsoever. And the experience is kind of a completely different level. So what I thought I'd do is play a little snippet of we managed to get on CNBC in the US last year. So it just kind of gives you an idea of the kind of the ground that we play in. So I'm going to play a little video here.
So let's put on the headset.
It's like a theme park in the back seat.
Is there any danger of the driver getting hit in the back of the head?
An immersive virtual reality experience incorporating data from the car's computer, whether that's turning, braking, or accelerating.
So the car's stopping and the game is stopping too.
So it's synchronized in real time. So when the car accelerates, your virtual experience accelerates. So it's way more immersive, and it reduces motion sickness as well.
Holoride.
I can share a link to that piece because it's quite interesting reading. It's a really great example of what we do, and we're very proud of that piece of work. I'm conscious that we need to get into the pharma side of things, so we've done a couple of other very narrative-driven experiences, which is why I've picked these pieces of work out specifically. So we worked with HBO and created a one-to-one replication of Silicon Valley's set. You might be familiar with the HBO TV show. And that allows you to have lots of different small micro experiences, which are all connected into one branched storyline, which we'll talk about a little bit in a minute. And another experience that we're very proud of was we generated the first virtual spacewalk, worked with the BBC on that. And that again is narratively driven, which enables us to put somebody in an environment that they wouldn't ordinarily ever be comfortable in, but because they're more focused on the purpose and the drive and their goals within that story, they engage with the experience at a slightly different level, which I think is really interesting. I'm more than happy to take questions about those kind of projects at a later date, but let's crack on. So we're here to talk about storytelling. Again, like I said earlier, storytelling is a really big deal for us in the studio. We believe that it promotes engagement, and with one eye on kind of the pharma industry, it encourages memory generation. And part of the reason it encourages memory generation so well is that, sorry, bear with me, is the way that in physical world memories work. So when you have a physical experience, it takes less cognitive load for your brain to kind of store that. And the cool thing about virtual and mixed reality experiences is they are the closest they can get to a physical event without you physically doing it, which is why using VR and MR for training and for learning is so useful, because people absorb it. So instead of it actually having data stored in your brain, it works like a memory, and that's why people seem to sometimes confuse a VR experience with real life, which is a whole fascinating different conversation altogether. We always use some key design pillars when we're taking on work. We focus on user experience, user interaction, and gameplay. Gameplay can often be just construed as someone hammering away at their phone or playing the Xbox, but it's all about the interaction, and it's all about engaging with a user and helping that person or encouraging that person to explore and take risks within that environment. We encourage exploration. We want it to be narrative driven. We want it to be story led, because that's the most interesting type of experience. And that's why I think the storytelling aspect for this particular talk is really interesting. I did some research and I tried to break down where I've seen some really interesting examples of XR being used across 3 different kind of pillars of the pharma industry. So R&D and sales, because I appreciate how important the sales aspect is. We're going to look briefly at treatment, and we're going to look at recovery, and we're just going to talk through some of the examples that I've found. So this was a particular quote that kind of jumped out of me when I was doing some research. Tell me and I forget, teach me and I remember, involve me and I learn, from Ben Franklin. So yeah, he was a smart cookie. Even he knew VR was somewhere down the line. But I think that it's particularly poignant, and it's a point that we keep coming back to about how those memories are generated and why it's such a good learning platform. So one of the first pharma examples, and you must excuse my naivety around the pharma industry. And like I said, I dug into it and I found it really fascinating. And so forgive me if I'm teaching people to suck eggs a little bit. But I know one of the things that first examples I came up with was the partnership between Bayer and Pixacor, and they were looking foremost at trying to drive people to come to their booth, purely sales to meet new clients. And they realized that they were getting a greater deal of engagement by introducing people to use MR and AR in order to explore what their technology and what their pharmaceutical products could offer. They used mobile AR to display atopic dermatitis flare-ups on an HCP's own hand, so the person could actually see that happening on their own particular hand, either using mixed reality goggles like a Magic Leap or a mobile AR headset, and I think the key word in here, which is why I've highlighted it, is it's the increase in empathy, which is another amazing result through using immersive technology. And you simply cannot fake empathy. Being in VR, not being distracted, means that you're entirely focused on what you're doing, engaging and with that particular activity. Good VR or good XR is interactive. Linear experiences don't work the same way. And it's why, again, storytelling and narrative is so important. So even just by taking someone through the process of experiencing what that particular medical condition might look like on someone's own hand, that in itself is a little bit of storytelling, and that's why people are engaging with it. And one of the results, talking about some data, they think they saw 80 hours of engagement across 3 days from 600 people, which that's some serious numbers of people wanting to come and experience that particular demonstration. An old company I used to work for Ogilvy, but not specifically Ogilvy Health, but I think this quote's particularly poignant. It is the content, interactivity, relative ease of use, and the wealth of overlaid and integrated information of effectively XR that allows for more meaningful disease education, because the user's own extraordinary personal experience is the focus. So again, we're already seeing a consistent theme around empathy, memory generation, and being able to put you in someone else's shoes. Another one from a kind of a learning and training process is through Novartis. They had to do some leukemia treatment training, and they had a very, very small time window to train as many people as they wanted. This is, it relies slightly on a real world demo within the experience. So you watch a video of someone doing the same thing that you're about to do, and then you see if you can replicate it accurately. It still requires you to follow steps and a process, but again, there is a small narrative in there. And people are able to kind of fill the gaps in these kind of immersive experiences. They don't care that they aren't entirely one-to-one CG lifelike. They immerse themselves in that, and they start to believe exactly what they are doing is the real thing. They've recently ported that over to the Oculus Quest VR headset, which is quite a low budget headset, but it's been proving to be incredibly popular. I've got one upstairs. We do an awful lot of work to publish to the Oculus platform. It's a really brilliant kind of gateway platform for these kind of experiences. Moving on to treatment, I thought this was particularly poignant. So there's a hospital in Tampa, Florida called St. Joseph's, and I like this example because what they're doing is they're combining new technology, which is VR, and combining it with the asset generation and the image generation that they get out of CT and MRI scans. So they're able to take those assets and place them into game engine environments. So game engine environments come in two normal flavors, which is either Unreal or Unity, and they allow you to do real-time rendering. So you get a very, very quick or real-time response to whatever you're doing within a CG world. So they can take those models and they can place them in that environment, and it has kind of two really, really great benefits. One, it allows the doctors to get kind of an unparalleled access to that data. They can scale those models up, they can get inside them, they can look around, and they've never been able to kind of do that before. It's always been a 2D or a 3D model rendered on a monitor. But the second and almost kind of more impactful result is the fact that they can then put a patient into an environment and talk them through the model of their own MRI scan or CT image. So it's not just showing you some graphics on the TV screen and trying to help convey what that person is about to go through. You can take them on that journey. Again, there's a storytelling aspect to this, especially when it comes to young people. They're able to take those young people who are probably pretty scared about what they're about to go through, and take them through that process that they're about to be put through in a way that's very unique and specific to them, and help them understand what is going to happen and why. And as that quote from Sarah says, it alleviates stress and anxiety. So again, we're continuing to see the benefit of this technology, and the way that you can weave a narrative around what you're trying to do with that data, and the benefits that come off of that, which is again a kind of a mental health and a more positive attitude towards the process that person's about to go through. This was a really interesting example to me because of the history of the gentleman that set up Osso VR. So Dr. Justin Barrett, he's the CEO, but he also has, he came from a game design background, which is really interesting, and he was a self-taught coder. So he came at his training idea very much with a kind of a video game steer on it. And there's a lot of strong arguments to be made that video games could be, I'm not saying I necessarily agree, but they could be the best storytelling tool out there because of the way that it promotes a person to discover that story, and because of the way that games are designed to branch out and give people a non-linear experience of a single story. And that's a whole other conversation, a whole other presentation, but the methodology behind designing a game is often much more complicated to write a good video game than it is to write a TV or a motion picture, because you are dealing mostly with a linear timeline, whereas in a game it has to be replayable and it has to have an element of agency in it, otherwise people won't engage with it. So he came from that kind of background, and he came with that kind of thinking, and I think it's really interesting that the way that they've allocated just a little bit of game mechanics into the training. There's a stat here that they believe that, sorry, just checking my notes. They believe that there was 230% better for the people who went through that game engine training, which is a significant statistic, just by adding some gamification around being able to not necessarily score, but allow to track how people are progressing. They're able to see if people are hesitating or shaking or looking at the wrong part of the patient altogether, which strikes me as being pretty pivotal if you're going to do some operations. But they're also able to ask for a hint as well. So they're not entirely on their own. So it's training them in a really, really safe environment. But again, giving them that agency to experiment and make the mistakes, but in a place where it has less of an impact. But I really liked the slight gamification, and I think it was interesting that he came from a games background. And again, another kind of good example where there is an underlying string of storytelling and narrative within what they're trying to get the person to do. Recovery's a really big topic. We could be here all day if I touched upon all the different examples of how VR and XR are being used in patient recovery. I saw examples of exposure therapy where they're trying to help people with claustrophobia or fear of heights, treatment for PTSD, where some hospitals and psychotherapy wards are building simulations of historical war grounds like the Iraq War or Afghanistan War, and putting ex-soldiers in that environment and helping them kind of almost come to terms with the historical incidents that they witnessed or they were involved in, but again within a safe environment. That's a particular example that really, really does rely on a very, very carefully written narrative. And social cognition, which is really interesting. I read an article about how young adults with autism are using virtual reality experiences to almost train themselves up from a social point of view. So if they were going on a date or they're going on a job interview, they're able to become more confident within their safe environment. It's entirely their environment, but again, using a story, putting them in a kind of a place where they can experiment and try out new things, enables them to test themselves out without kind of getting out of their comfort zone. What's really interesting is that from a hardware and technology point of view, even this year, we're going to start to see some significant leaps in VR headset hardware where there are going to be models out there. I believe there's one by HP due for release in the autumn that is going to measure your cognitive load. So we can already track where you're looking, where your eyes are looking within a VR headset, which is amazing, and we get a lot of data from that. But imagine being able to understand if someone's actually paying attention or if someone is looking at one thing but thinking about another. So all that data is going to be available to people over the next kind of year, 18 months as those headsets become better and more available. So from a kind of cognitive load point of view and social cognitive training, or any type of training for that matter, that kind of data is going to be really, really fascinating. And just a couple of recovery examples that I think, again, play to the narrative and kind of game engine approach. This is Treadport, which is based in the University of Utah. This is a free-to-roam motorized platform. So it's in a 360 environment. So they're not using a headset, they're using LED screens here. But free-to-roam games and experiences, when done well and in conjunction with a branching narrative, allows for the same person to keep trying and keep exploring in different routes, which is a really clever way of engaging with someone to come back and keep doing the same physio. It's not the same. It's not the same day or the same experience day in, day out. There's an elements of score. There are elements of hidden objects within that environment that person can go and find, and it's almost like taking their mind off what they're actually trying to do, which is encouraging them to try and learn to walk or get better at physical motion. So again, it's a very clever way of using the narrative mechanism within immersive technology to help people kind of get away from the day-to-day, and you would probably see a real increase in the speed that person will improve in their motion, almost because they're not thinking about it as much as they might do. And then finally, there's this gentleman in New Zealand. It's about 18 months old. But he had a C7 spinal cord injury. He had no motion from the chest down, and he was in a wheelchair for 4 years. And he was invited to start doing some physical therapy through VR. And you can see those two images are, the one on the left is the image of him climbing Mount Everest in VR, and the one on the right is obviously him in the real world. And there's an amazing documentary on YouTube about this, and I can share that. So basically, over the course of a year, he did more and more of this physical therapy within VR, and they used electrodes to stimulate his muscles so that his brain and his muscle kind of filled in the gaps. And then eventually, in the end of the documentary, he stands of his own volition with his own muscles, and he's absolutely convinced that this way of training, by taking him out of the real world and putting him into a world which is, again, story driven, encouraging him to climb Everest. He could hear the wind, he could feel the snow falling down in front of him, and he said it felt like he was actually there. And it's about kind of, I can't help but think that each one of these examples is all about just helping someone with a little bit of what's the word I'm looking for? Basically taking them out of their real life and just putting them in an environment that is safe, that is exciting, that is inspirational, that allows them to focus on what they're trying to do without kind of looking at some weights that they might want to have to lift, or looking at a place at the room that they have to try and walk to. It's very encouraging to see these kind of things work and work well. And I urge you to kind of try and look that one up specifically, because yeah, I got a bit emotional last night when I was watching the video. I don't mind admitting. To conclude, and like I said right at the beginning, when I started kind of digging into this kind of topic, I was really blown away by how much the kind of XR and immersive industry has been embraced across kind of various different areas of pharma. And I think it's important to realize that the storytelling does work in each one of those examples, even if it's a kind of a very simple narrative right up to the most complex game mechanics. It encourages engagement. it promotes learning, and it improves mental well-being. And I think the best thing about it is that all of that works best within immersive technology, and I think that's kind of really uplifting for me. I think that's really exciting for the future.
So I'll move on to Ryan, who's joined us now. Hi, Ryan. So Ryan is Chief Growth Officer at Zeitgeist. So Zeitgeist partner with businesses to provide content and support and give expert advice to help businesses grow. So Ryan's going to share some of this expertise with us today and talk us through how to enrich your digital pharma experience using storytelling.
Thank you very much. Fantastic. So thanks, Sam, for the introduction. I'm Ryan Hall. I've spent my career in creative businesses and consultancies, working with brands to effectively tell stories and build solutions and deliver solutions that engage between brands and consumers. I've had my fair share of pharma experience, but I've worked with brands, across the spectrum, pharma side of things, Boehringer Ingelheim, all the way through to banks like Deutsche Bank running their digital transformation platform. And proud to say that I've brought Channel 4 to mobile with their 4OD product offering on mobile and tablet devices. But today we're going to talk about how pharma companies can use digital to create better engagement. And for me, better engagement always comes back to that storytelling component as well. It's about humanizing digital experiences and making sure that there's a value exchange between the business and the end consumer. When we look at the pharma space, they've really got two kinds of audiences to deal with. So those end users can either be healthcare professionals, or they can indeed be patients themselves. So if we look at the different challenges that are orientated between the different audience types, within the healthcare professional side of things, we have to explain how products work. We need to be transparent. We need to help them understand the intricacies of the end product, the drug, or the product itself. Importantly, brands also need to try and tell that story around how they can support the healthcare professionals in their job, be that the daily tasks, or be it how we can start to improve processes, how the way we can integrate our products and services within their day-to-day working life. And importantly also, we need to think about how we can adapt to the new generations of those professionals and what their future demands may look like. How are we supposed to communicate with them? What is the best way? What's the best medium? What's the best channel for us to tell those stories? And importantly, how we can then start to build the interaction between brand and healthcare professionals. It's obviously a very different world when it comes to patients. So for patients, it's really a case of, well, where does that storytelling start? Is it about symptoms? Is it about that kind of self-diagnosis perhaps? And it's typically, it typically is the point of engagement with patients in that kind of early stages of kind of any ailment, disease, or kind of condition. Storytelling is also a two-way street when it comes to patients. And it's as much a job for brands to listen to the stories that patients actually have around understanding what they're going through, their stories, their experiences, to really start to try and drive that 360 communication, 360 storytelling between brand and consumer, which is really where the value then starts to be brought in. And really the key driver from storytelling from brand to patient is really about how we can help them make better decisions, how we can educate, how we can inform, allowing them to make decisions and then come to either a healthcare professional or someone to help them with the treatment themselves. So I thought, unfortunately, I haven't got anything quite as impressive as Neil's examples. I haven't got any video, so I really did enjoy that, Neil. But we've focused around splitting out what best in class looks like from a digital platform perspective, and who's doing great work both from the patient side of things, but also on the healthcare professional side of things. And we've also got a few kind of simple recommendations and themes which we see coming on the back of that as well. So this first example is really about where we can use online communities as spaces to bring brands and consumers together. And this is around Epilepsy Advocate, which is an online community. And it's actually built using Facebook and a simple website, and also leveraging a YouTube channel as well. So trying to ensure that we've got that multi-touch point piece where the end user feels comfortable engaging with the brand, especially around what may be sensitive content. We find that interesting simply because, firstly, it's incredibly easy to join. It's got very low barriers to entry, which is a real positive when dealing with a tricky subject. And the other important factor is it's about getting real information, genuine stories from end users and patients about what life is like when it comes to living with epilepsy. I think that transparency, that honesty is an incredibly important part of any storytelling experience, no matter how reciprocal that may look, what it look like. Importantly, also, the Epilepsy Advocate platform does deliver access to specific medical and educational resources. It's very easy to understand. The content strategy has been incredibly well thought through. And again, coming back to that accessibility point, it's really easy and accessible for the end users to get their hands on content and dive into different levels of reading and engagement as they see fit. The next example is Mabu, which is a little bit more of a kind of physical digital crossover than necessarily just an app or a website or kind of content-led platform. Mabu is an AI-powered robot which enables patients to converse and have a conversation with Mabu, and it's very clever in the way that it starts to capture data. It captures data intelligently around their feelings, how they are responding to their ailment or condition, and it also then starts to build priorities around how they can create advice around the way that they should be handling their treatment as well. Which is absolutely fascinating. On a personal level, I think the physical implementation of the device is a little bit creepy, but it is really interesting to see how it's starting to create these physical digital crossovers, and just trying to personalize exactly how patients can respond back to brands and healthcare professionals in a really kind of personal and one-to-one way. We found it really interesting, one, from the 24/7 support side of things as well. It drives patients to have daily check-ins. It has that kind of point of interaction. It really has a drawback mechanism to ensure that patients are remembering to engage, remembering to take their medication, and also take up-to-date advice as well. And because it's AI driven as well, the rules engine built into it allows patients to have very tailored conversations with Mabu, meaning that the system itself can become intelligent and start to try and drive real insight from the end user. And importantly, that ties into the way that the actual behaviors are collected and the way that data is collected, and can then obviously be processed by the pharma company themselves, which in this case was built by Takeda and Leo Pharma Lab Innovation. Next is kind of also really kind of slightly immersive experience as well, and this chart starts to talk a little bit more about where Neil was coming from, and the way that audio and visual content can really be brought to life and really start to build much more engaging experience as well. And this is the Takeda Life Theatre over in Japan. I thought it was interesting simply because of the use of visuals and actually really bringing to life actually what the situation looks like at a kind of a biological level, making, well, they say making it easier to understand. Certainly it kind of makes it real. Not quite sure how educated from a biology perspective you need to be, but that kind of realism through video is a really exciting and interesting point of difference. Also, this is because it's like more contemporary as well, very much like a lot of Neil's examples. It does naturally, and it has naturally attracted younger generations to try and engage, which is great from an education perspective as well, ensuring that we're trying to engage different generations around healthcare education. It's also a great opportunity for end users, patients and healthcare visitors, to get to know the brand a little bit more as well, because it's such an experience, and the way that the audio and visual is brought together to tell a message and tell that story. It really emphasizes Takeda as a brand, and it really has become quite an interesting focal point, which has driven a lot of footfall and a lot of traffic as well. Next is Living With app, which is really obviously an important topic around living with cancer. So I'm sure a topic very close to people's hearts. And again, like the first example, this is really about trying to help people connect with the brand, connect with themselves, connect with families, connect with healthcare professionals and doctors, to ensure that they're getting the right support. So this is quite an emotional example, but it's really been proven to be delivering some great results. Why we find it interesting, it's kind of a cross section between medical advice and medical information, but importantly also the emotional side of living with cancer as well. And I think even with the kind of the name itself, Living With, is beautifully positioned to try and tell that story and allow people to consume content as and when they wish, but also getting real content, getting real human interest stories is absolutely fascinating. Next up is Clinica. So this is about the problem statement is about the fragmented pharmacy space over in Southeast Asia. The experience was born to try and streamline those processes, streamline operations, and ensure that the right level of care and service can be delivered to the end consumer base. And this is delivered by a group of pharma companies, including Merck, Roche, Novartis, and also a few more. So it's really interesting to see that multiple brands can actually come together to deliver an experience like this, which is much more inclusive to a wider audience, whilst also still adding value and obviously achieving their own business objectives as well. Found this really interesting just because of the number of interactions that it was able to drive. Much heavier interaction between patients and pharmacists, meaning that people are getting the right care, the right medication at the right time. But importantly for the brands, it really drives quite a significant amount of data, excuse me, quite a significant amount of insights as well, both from the pharmacy networks, but also the usage behavior for individual patients themselves. It also offers fantastic opportunities for education to the end users. Again, trying to tell that story in a contextual way around a certain situation, around a certain moment of time, and around a certain piece of medication. So then moving beyond patient and looking at how brands are delivering healthcare professional storytelling, healthcare professional engagement through a variety of digital platforms. And HER is a website which is about better assisting patients and sharing tools through healthcare professional education as well. And this is delivered through AbbVie in the US. For me, it was really interesting around the way that the content was able to help healthcare professionals emphasize with the patient's condition and really kind of understand the intricacies of what it's like living with something. And really trying to drive that better understanding of what it's like, but also the importance of actually driving support around correct and kind of improved diagnosis as well. The platform features not just medical theory, but it also has a wide selection of tools and toolkit within there, and also a significant amount of media assets as well. Which really kind of drives engagement with healthcare professionals, but also ensures that there's quite a heavy amount of retention with the actual use of the platform, meaning that that conversation can happen more readily the more that the user engages with the platform themselves. Next we have Imagine app, which is around psoriasis and eczema, helping healthcare professionals and healthcare patients keep on track of the condition that they have themselves. And this is a really intelligent kind of camera-based experience, allowing them to track the actual skin condition themselves and map it through a kind of a course of time. One is really interesting because it starts to collate a very large database of data, trying to track progress for individuals, but incredibly easy system for healthcare professionals to use actually out in the field themselves. It really helps healthcare professionals drive the way that they're able to evaluate patients, and it really starts to build a much deeper connection between Leo Pharma, which is the brand, and the actual healthcare professionals themselves. I mean, they've got a much deeper connection with those individuals. Also, from an educational perspective, it really kind of drives away any skeptical mindset within the healthcare professionals because of the way that the application captures data, and all of the information is able to drive back into Leo Pharma's research facility to ensure that it's always contributing back to the condition and the improvement of the drug themselves. Then we have NeuroExpert, again, another digital platform, really around trying to deliver training, events, and kind of connectivity within the healthcare market themselves. So trying to drive those conversations, trying to drive that storytelling, not only between brand and healthcare professional, but also within healthcare professionals themselves. It's not singularly related to one type of product. The content is very broad. And there's a wealth of educational content and online resources to try and support healthcare professionals around the events themselves. So that's my examples. In terms of the key themes for the future and where digital can support that storytelling experience, it really comes down to, for us, kind of three key things. One, really trying to drive information and trying to support the education message as well, ensuring that patients can have an online experience first, so they can start to immerse themselves in certain situations within conditions and ailments, but also trying to create more credible experiences and to keep patients and also healthcare professionals informed. Conversations are absolutely key, and certainly with the trends within digital experiences moving to much more of a conversational user interface, chat style experiences, it does give a sense of anonymity, but it also gives the end users a sense of greater control in the way that they can have that conversation and manage it themselves. And it does feel much more collaborative. And a lot of businesses are actually delivering this through avatars rather than individuals themselves. But it does mean that that two-way conversation can be very beneficial and still anonymous for the end user, whilst giving the brands themselves a significant amount of information, insight, and control over the way that they want to tell their story. And then finally, the extended experience. So obviously digital is 24/7 anyway, but brands and pharma businesses are using digital platforms to ensure that they can deliver a 24/7 solution, through digital platforms, through chat themselves, through video calling, but even if it's just as simple as online access to new content. It's becoming a real focus for brands to ensure that that's becoming very much extended. And going back to Neil's slides as well, different ways to incorporate and experience content. And that's all I have for you today. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks so much, Ryan. That was great. I'm sure there's a lot of great takeaways that everyone can have there. So we'll loop back to some of the questions that we've got throughout the presentations. So let me just get up one of our first questions. Obviously, if anyone does think of any other questions, feel free to just send them through as we discussed. So the first one is for Neil. So what tools do you use to prototype these VR experiences to your clients? Are there sort of steps that you use before you present them to your clients, or do you go straight into the full experience?
It kind of depends on the scale of the project, but because game engine technology is so quick to provide a result, it's actually sometimes just as easy to jump into Unreal or Unity and do what we call a grey box or a white box, which is an untextured a geometry build of trying to communicate the environment or the journey that that particular user is on. It's so useful to be able to use game engine technology these days rather than kind of traditional movie or TV CG techniques that require kind of a long time rendering. So we can kind of get results quite quickly. And game engine technology is often used to do a lot of physical film mapping out and to see and blocking and to see where camera shots work. So we try and get into engine as soon as possible, and it also kind of helps communicate the ideas back to the client.
Great, amazing. So we have another one. So for Ryan, did these websites generate significantly better reach and engagement than other sites? And if you could just give us sort of a bit more of an insight into the traffic that they get as well, that'd be great.
Yeah, the short answer is yes. I mean, we spent quite a lot of time researching what we felt were the better experiences in terms of traction, engagement, and which kind of got more profile. Getting the actual traffic levels themselves, we didn't build them, we don't know, so unfortunately I don't have that information. What I would say is everything that we read in when researching these case studies is that it was a significant increase in the way that the engagement side of things was delivered, over and above just a traditional website. It's always about trying to tell through kind of slightly more interesting means and mechanics and techniques and features. And because all of these individual experiences had some, if not many, different of the some of those little features, the brands themselves were tracking these as significant improvement on any other standard platform that they had. The one thing I'd say is, as with every digital experience, whether it's an app or a website or whatever it is, build it and they will come doesn't work. All of these experiences were made real and were made a success through marketing in some shape or form, predominantly content marketing. But you have to find your audience and drive them to the solution to ensure that you can get that information, that you can get that traction, and then over a period of time through referral, the platforms took on a life of their own. But build it and they will come doesn't work. So as good as any platform may be, it's pointless unless you actually try and drive traffic to it.
Oh, great. So we have a bit of a discussion point for all of the panelists. So could you share your views on the impact of the current situation on medical conferences and how pharma companies can take part in online events? And how would these attract and engage with online attendees as they would in real life on a promotional stand? I'll put that to the whole panel.
Yeah, I'll pick. Go on, Christine. Go on after you.
I mean, there's a number of ways of doing it. One of which is obviously to hold your conferences or webinars obviously online, and also to just be quite clear as to what you're going to be sharing. So whether it's going to be an educational about the product or the service, or whether it's more of a sales kind of thing, to going back to the millennials and the being genuine and upfront and transparent. I think if you're advertising something, you're inviting people on, I think it's good to explain what it is they're going to be experiencing. And I mean, that's certainly one way of doing it. I'm sure that Neil and Ryan will be able to explain a bit more what could happen on a sort of more interactive gamification kind of environment.
Yeah, I mean, the current situation has completely shifted the way that any business is trying to engage their audience, and everyone's trying to shift things online. I know that Amazon Web Services, I know that's not a pharma client, have a huge annual event called Ignite, and they've had to shift this online. And really, I think it's one choice of technology which is going to make it really powerful. Obviously, Zoom is very popular. There are other platforms out there as well. The interactivity, I mean, very simple things, even like polling, for example, does start to drive that better engagement. Obviously, any kind of sidelines and sidebars and kind of step out rooms also kind of create that dynamism in the content. But for me, really, that with an event, historically, when you were just going to attend physically, you'd turn up, you'd learn some stuff, and then you'd go home. The job really now for brands is, again, you've got to have much more of a bell curve of content and a bell curve of engagement around the event. So there's got to be a massive amount of pre-ramp up. So a significant amount more marketing, a significant amount more content that engages, stimulus, community building, and that also has to have a bit of a long tail off the back of the event as well, so people genuinely feel like they're getting value from it. Because, you know, I'm sure everyone's felt this, you know, sat on like 1,000 Zoom calls in the last kind of 2 months. They can blur into one. And, you know, if you're trying to do an all-day event where you're going from Zoom to Zoom to Zoom to Zoom, there's got to be something else there to kind of keep your brain active as well. So I think it's looking a little bit more kind of holistically about the bookends of an event to make sure it's successful.
Gosh, and from my point of view, yeah, we've been inundated with people asking us to figure out how they can recreate their event or events for the next 6, 9, 12 months using immersive technology. And it's really broad, and it's probably longer than I can go into, but it kind of depends on the event. It very much depends on the number of people you're talking about. But we kind of keep coming back to using mobile AR as a way of really kind of enhancing an online event. And that can either be through an app where you can really throw some amazing functionality at the augmented reality experience, or even through web AR, which is coming on leaps and bounds now, and that's just using your mobile browser to allow some sort of augmented reality experience. I'm not saying you would do an entire event in AR, and I think, to Ryan's point, I think you can. It's about picking and choosing the different tools in order to keep that event interesting. And there'll be horses for courses. You know, sometimes there's nothing like a good old-fashioned Zoom panel, as case in point, and sometimes I actually just want to go away and engage with some content on my own, and if I can do that in my own environment at my own time. And you know, we were talking with a different client not long ago about doing an AR event, and you can time it. You know, why you can synchronize that content so that you can still make it feel like an event. But the best thing about that is that once you've made it, people can then come on and see it, much like we're recording this, and experience it at their own time. So I don't think there's a product that solves it all. Often what we're finding is that the solution for a client that they want kind of straight away is actually quite expensive. But there are some platforms out there that are coming out. Spatial have just released a free demonstration version of their product, which is a VR kind of meeting space that looks to be taking a lot of good learnings from some previous products that have been a bit average. But they look to be, it's really interesting. We're going to install it and test it. It's that multiplayer VR experience. So it's those kind of things that I think will have a good uptick over the course of the next few months.
Cool. And I know we've had a couple of questions about like the limitations of using sort of like the large animations and the videos that you guys have shown. I suppose, have you found any sort of limitations with regards to like bandwidth and things like that, and using them remotely as we are at the moment?
I guess from our point of view, yes, you've really got to kind of play to your strengths, really, which is why web AR is great, because it's relying on your browser to do a lot of the heavy lifting, and it's great for frictionless adoption. Everyone's got a phone and everyone's got a web browser. People don't necessarily like to download apps as much as they used to. So from a marketing experience, you have to make sure that app has value outside of that event. And that kind of requires a little bit more thought. From an immersive point of view, we're very excited about when 5G is really accessible, rather than just everyone saying it is. You know, give it another 6, 9, 12 months when there are more 5G devices out there, including the new Apple phone I expect in October will be 5G. That's going to transform things, because all of a sudden you can use cloud rendering and cloud computing to do some significant heavy lifting, and your phone can download that information and present that to you instantly. 5G is that quick that your phone effectively just becomes a display unit. It doesn't have to do anything, and that means that the sky's the limit with regards to what you can do to a mobile device.
Yeah, and Christine, I know you showed some examples of sort of our large scale presentations as well. So I don't know if you want to sort of touch on it.
Yeah, I mean, from those examples, for example, we're not suggesting that the attendees are avatars as such, but that it is a sort of augmented version of a webinar where you can work it as a PowerPoint. It's clickable, etc. But it looks like it's on massive screens. You can have different things happening on the different screens, and it's really to make you feel like you're in a in that sort of conference feel. But it's not where what we're offering anyway. I think what we've experienced in the past is having too many avatars. It complicates the technology a bit, and it can be quite jerky. And I mean, it's come a long way from what it used to be. But that's not what I showed earlier on actually entails. What I showed earlier on is really, if you like, a presentation that is on steroids. But it would be the same feel as a Zoom video, where you can still ask questions, you can participate that way, but you're not necessarily in the audience as an avatar. That's just a sort of trick visual, really.
Cool. So let me just refer back to the questions that we've got here. Another one for Neil. So where do Rewind see the biggest uptake outside of virtual training?
The biggest what does that, are they asking for kind of the biggest uptake for VR outside of training? Sorry, I'm not entirely certain.
Yeah, I think so. That's how I'd, yeah.
Yeah, so obviously virtual training's great because of the way people engage with it and take away the knowledge of the experience that they're doing. Yeah, there is there's no point denying that VR has seen the bulk of its success and its kind of financial uptake through gaming. Although it's interesting, and I think I'm probably going to half answer someone else's question as well, is that there is a significant increase in people using VR headsets to do social media as well. So there's an app called VR Chat, which saw record usage to the tune of about 125% month over month. I'm literally reading that statistic. I literally got it in my email about 5 minutes ago, so that's hot off the press. So I think, yes, there is virtual reality for training is brilliant. Experientially, it's fantastic. It's used to be very, very expensive because of every headset required a PC, and it just got complicated. But the Oculus Quest is great because it's low cost and it can be networked, and it's, like I say, it's a good gateway piece of hardware. People are using it for exercise. There's a new piece of a new app called Supernatural that came out recently that they reckon is going to rival Peloton, and it puts you in different environments, and it's got a monthly subscription. So I think they're very excited about that. Funnily enough, we are working on something which is focused on meditation in VR, because we can take you to any kind of different environment, and there's a lot of science and research going into what makes for a conducive environment and makes things relaxing versus antagonistic. So it has a lot of uses, but there's no point denying that gaming is obviously its natural audience, and it's become very, 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 very successful, and it will continue to grow. Yeah, I also saw Walmart have built their own game for training, and they've made it available to 1.4 million people. So they're starting to create their own IP as part of their training and HR program, which is great. So I'm aware I may not have answered that question very well, but hopefully that's useful.
Great, thank you. Have we got any more questions? I'm just trying to check if there's any that I haven't got to. So obviously, I know there was a couple of questions just regarding some statistics as well. So if you do have any further questions, feel free to email me. I'll share my email with everybody at the end of the event as well. So if you'd like me to connect you with anyone, or just would like any more pointers on anything, then feel free to reach out. But I think we have managed to get through most of the questions there, and we've actually made good time. So yeah, thank you so much to all of the speakers. Oh, sorry, do we have one more question? Okay, yeah, no, sorry. Yeah, thank you so much to all of the speakers there. That was really great. And like I said, we've recorded the whole event tonight, so we'll pop that up on the YouTube channel and let you know when it's up there. And then also, if anybody does have any suggestions for any topics you'd like us to cover for any future events or anything, then please feel free to let us know. So thanks everyone for joining us, and I hope you have a lovely evening.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.